we share a very interesting, one thing that we do share is that we both grew up in Church of God in Christ households. For people who don't know what the Church of God in Christ is, because there's a lot of discussion between what fundamentalism and what Pentecostal is. It's a Pentecostal church,
yes,
as opposed to fundamental, which means that it's really about the charisma, the charismatic nature of religion. And if you grow up in the same way that I think people who grew up in the Greek Orthodox Church or any place where there's real ritual, if you grew up in that church, you don't, no matter what happens to you, you do not forget it.
yes.
There's just no way. So, because it's incredibly ritualized.
Yes.
So, and I can see that coming through. So you talked about the mummification. Can you talk a little bit about how you came to that and how you came to starting with performance and installation?
Well, it's amazing because I'm from Chicago. I basically grew up in Chicago, from Alabama originally, Birmingham. And so one day I went to the Museum of Science and Industry, which is a very large institution. And they house the Tutankhamun exhibition.
Right.
And I was totally blown away by this exhibit. And so after coming back from the exhibit, I came up with the idea of mummification. And then that's when I really began to get more into performers. My first performance piece was at the Art Institute of Chicago, where I wrapped up the president of the Art Institute, as well as the NBC News anchor person,
Okay.
as well as the director of the Institute.
You must have been young.
So I really got into the whole process of wrapping.
Wow.
And so I guess the next 10 years, I was just used the whole wrapping process and mummifying. I even mummified myself.
Now, wait a minute, how did you do that?
I dealt with it's a whole 2-hour performance piece where I wrapped up. Now, I became a kind of like a spirit of Tutankhamun, and I took on the role of the Tutankhamun, and so the performance piece led into the actual installation and wrapping. So mummification came directly out of me seeing the exhibition at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago.
Now, were you also since I know that you are an art educator and you've been very much involved in the study of African, cultural systems and stuff, were you starting to do that at that point? Was looking at Egypt the beginning of that? How did?
Yeah, I actually began to start looking at African art. Began to study African. I also began to look at some of the painters, Picasso, who was influenced by the whole icons of African sculpture. And but then I began to get into the whole Egyptology in terms of what the whole ritualized process they use. So it kind of coincided with my church experience. So it was kind of like a dual process for me. So the work I began to get into this whole performance aspect that really I thought was indicative to my upbringing. The mummification process is about remembering, it's about wrapping, it's about, you see the choir robes, and see the faces are wrapped as a mummy. It's a personal piece for me, remembering my father, me growing up in the church, and seeing the ritual of dance every Sunday, sometimes 3 times a week, because I had to go to church. It was an obligation. And so the mummification, to me, bridges those two, the historical with Egypt, as well as contemporary, just like where I come from. That's the way I incorporate that piece. And you see Jesus Saves on the top, and we have an icon in my house. My father have always had this picture of Jesus. It had Jesus Saved.